When you hear the term serial killer, a few infamous names probably pop into your head. Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, these 20th century monsters with huge body counts and media circus trials that turn them into twisted household names. There's a dark curiosity at play here. Something about senseless, repeated violence taps into our primal fear and fascination. We wonder, why did they do it? What could make someone compelled to kill? Were they born broken, or did the world twist them into what they became? And that raises a bigger question: are serial killers a modern phenomenon, or have they always existed? Today we're going to take a time machine back to the 15th century to meet Gilles de Rais, a celebrated knight, war hero, and quite possibly one of the first recorded serial killers in history. We'll look at how his crimes compare to modern mass murderers, explore how medieval society understood this kind of evil, and see what his trial can tell us about justice then and now. So strap in, because we're heading straight into the dark heart of the Middle Ages. Gilles de Rais should have been remembered as a legend, a decorated soldier, a national hero. Born into an incredibly wealthy noble family in Brittany, he inherited a vast estate, one of the richest in Western France. He quickly rose through the military ranks during the 100 Years' War and became one of the key commanders fighting alongside Joan of Arc. When the French won the siege of Orleans in 1429, Gilles was right there, next to Joan. That same year, he was promoted to Marshal of France, the kingdom's highest military distinction. He was just 24 years old. By all accounts, he was brave, charismatic, and ruthlessly effective on the battlefield. You'd expect to see him in a Greatest Warriors of the Middle Ages YouTube compilation video. Instead, we're here trying to figure out how he went from knight to killer. Let's rewind a bit. Gilles' story has eerie parallels to modern serial killers, and that starts with his childhood. When he was just 11, he witnessed his father die in a violent hunting accident. Not long after, his mother passed away of illness. With both parents gone, he was sent to live with his grandfather, a man who saw Gilles as a tool for his own ambition. Some historians believe that this upbringing, emotionally cold, status-obsessed, stunted him emotionally. Let's take a look at Ted Bundy, one of the most famous examples of a modern serial killer. He was raised without a father figure, and throughout his childhood, he was told that his mother was his sister, and his grandparents were actually his parents. His grandfather was abusive, and Ted personally witnessed him lashing out at people and animals alike. The instability of his childhood created a sense of internal confusion and emotional detachment, mirroring the effects that a similar upbringing had on Gilles de Rais. People who knew Gilles described him as impulsive, arrogant, and quick-tempered, dangerous traits in a young noble. But in war, those kinds of traits were almost an advantage. And for a while, war gave him structure, purpose. He channeled that fire onto the battlefield. But when peace came and his military career started to wind down, that darkness had nowhere else to go. After Joan of Arc's execution in 1431, Gilles became more withdrawn. He retreated to his estates and without the violence of war began inventing new forms of chaos for himself. He spent wildly: pageants, choirs, costumes, imported manuscripts, private theatricals. In 1 year alone, he burned through so much money that he had to start selling off ancient family lands just to keep the lifestyle going. His relatives were horrified. The once respected Marshal of France was acting more like a bored, decadent prince than a nobleman of the realm. Arguments broke out, lawsuits followed, he was spiraling fast, and then things got darker. Before we get to what happened next, we need to talk about something that's often overlooked in medieval history: the mental toll of war. Today we recognize PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as a real and devastating condition, but it didn't come into medical vocabulary until the 20th century. That doesn't mean people weren't suffering from it. Medieval chroniclers like Jean de Joinville, writing about the Crusades, described soldiers who came home broken, men who would sit in silence for hours, who refused food, who withdrew from the world. Chroniclers of the 100 Years' War, the same war Gilles fought in, noted that some knights were haunted by the slaughter they witnessed, and would retire to monasteries to seek peace or penance. They didn't call it PTSD, they called it melancholy or soul sickness, but the symptoms were recognizable and they were very real. Gilles never became a monk, but what he did turn to was a warped cocktail of religious obsession and occult practice, a spiritual crisis that turned demonic. He began funding elaborate religious performances, claiming he wanted to glorify God. But while he was investing in Catholic rituals, he was also summoning alchemists, astrologers, and magicians to perform dark rites in secret. He believed that through demonic pacts and blood rituals, he could restore his lost fortune and power. And the price of those rituals, allegedly, was the blood of children. It's not hard to imagine how trauma, power, and madness may have converged in one man and erupted in horror. Soon, whispers started to spread across the French countryside. Children were going missing near Gilles' estates. Some were last seen with his servants, who offered them jobs, food, or education. Peasants reported seeing servants carrying bundles out at night and burning strange objects behind castle walls. But in medieval France, nobles were untouchable. Even if the peasants suspected him, few dared accuse him openly. It wasn't until 1440, when Gilles got into a legal dispute with a local clergyman, that the church and his cousin, the Duke of Brittany, started taking a closer look, and what they found was horrific. Gilles was arrested. The charges? Murder, sodomy, heresy, occult rituals, and most chilling of all, the deaths of over 100 children. The trial was huge. Nobles, clerics, townspeople, all stunned. How could a marshal of France, a companion of Joan of Arc, be behind something this evil? Gilles' two longtime servants, Etienne and Henri, gave detailed voluntary confessions admitting they had delivered children to Gilles for years. They described the killings in gruesome detail: sexual assault, dismemberment, satanic rituals. One claimed they had disposed of over 40 bodies in a single location. Witnesses from nearby villages included Perronne Lessart, a local woman who testified that her 10-year-old son was lured away by one of Gilles' men and never seen again. Recounting the day that Gilles and his servant had taken her son, she claimed that the nobleman had said that the child had been well chosen and that he was as beautiful as an angel. Another parent whose son had been taken by Gilles, a man named Jean Colline, testified that the same thing had been said to him. In light of what was discovered later, it's clear that Gilles was looking for certain physical traits when he chose his victims. The volume of testimony was staggering. Gilles initially denied the charges, but under threat of excommunication and later torture, he confessed. He described how he lured, abused, and murdered children as part of his occult spiritual experiments. The trial records, translated today, are chilling in their detail. Gilles was found guilty and sentenced to be hanged and burned simultaneously. A pretty gruesome punishment, but one that was considered just for such crimes. His final act shocked everyone. Before his death, he gave a public confession, repenting and urging the crowd to live piously. And they cried. According to royal chronicler Jean Chartier, many in the crowd were moved to tears by his speech. Despite his horrific crimes, they saw a man earnestly repenting, begging God for forgiveness. That's something that's deeply medieval, this idea that no one is beyond redemption, that even the worst sinner, if truly penitent, can be saved. Even in death, Gilles de Rais remained a contradiction. A monster and a martyr, a butcher and a believer. So was he truly guilty? Some modern scholars argue that his confession under torture could be unreliable. Others note that the church and his cousin, the Duke of Brittany, had financial reasons to bring him down, seizing his lands after his execution. But the scale and consistency of the testimonies, especially from unrelated peasants and multiple confessing servants, make the case incredibly compelling. Most historians today agree he was guilty. So how does Gilles de Rais stack up against our modern understanding of serial killers? Shockingly well. He fits the pattern: childhood trauma, early success, descent into fantasy and violence, ritualistic killings and attempts to justify it all through some twisted internal logic. And just like modern serial killers, Bundy, Dahmer, Richard Ramirez, he attracted a strange mix of horror and fascination. People didn't just want him punished, they wanted to understand him. And that's the terrifying truth. Serial killers aren't a product of modernity. They've always been with us, hiding behind crowns, uniforms, or in this case, a knight's shining armor. What do you think? Was Gilles de Rais a uniquely medieval monster, or just a very old example of something deeply human? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm John, and this has been Medieval Mindset. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe for more medieval history, and I'll see you next time when we uncover what the past still has to teach us about the darkness in ourselves.